Welcome to Getting Defensive Weekend Primer, presented by Gridiron Ratings. Your path to the title starts with Gridiron Ratings. I am your host, JJ Wenner, and tonight we take a look at the latest news and dive into the roster advice you need. With me tonight, as always, is Gridiron Ratings Senior IDP Analyst. You can find him on Twitter at the IDP Tipster, Gary Van Dyke. Gary, how are you doing?
I am doing really good. How are you doing, JJ?
Much better than the people watching this football game because it is terrible. Also with us tonight is our returning champion. You're back again. You can find him on Twitter at Dynasty Tripp. Tripp Brebner, what's going on, brother?
That's a good night. You know, it's nights like tonight where you got two teams on the West Coast that make me think, man, should I be on the West Coast? Because then I could go to sleep at a reasonable hour after the game.
Oh, that would be nice. That would be nice. But before we kick off, remember to subscribe below for a chance to win the Gridiron Ratings Playbook, the only resource you need for all of your fantasy leagues. We will draw one winner for every 25 new subscribers, so be sure to hit the subscribe button below. Well, let's get to it, gentlemen. Jalen Smith has been signed by the Packers. What does this mean for Devondre Campbell and Chris Barnes, Gary?
Probably hurts Campbell, in my opinion, more than it would hurt Barnes. I would think that Smith should be better than Campbell and probably take over that position down the road here. It's just going to take a few weeks. There's no guarantees on anything. Unfortunately, I think that Barnes might take the biggest hit in the end. Apparently, Smith really wanted to end up with the Packers. So I couldn't imagine, though, that he would have done that without some kind of real chance of playing, So, I mean, it's going to be a wait and see. Now, this coming weekend, I wouldn't worry about, Smith really cutting into anybody's time. He just got there, so they're not that desperate. I couldn't see him really getting into the lineup this week.
Well, I'm getting defensive right off the bat. I got to tell you, I got Barnes is dead, in my opinion. I think that's just the best he's played in his career, in my opinion. I think Barnes has struggled in the new scheme. I think he looked better last year when he had a lot of protection from the D-line. I think they're exposing him a little bit more and he's struggling to stack and shed, and that's really hurting him, in my opinion. Campbell's the more athletic player. And I don't think Smith is.
I did say that Barnes would be the guy that took the real hit. You didn't hear that, huh?
Say again?
I actually did mention that Barnes would take the bigger hit, that he would be the guy that would be left out.
Okay.
I slid that in there with like 2-3 words.
Okay.
But you're still getting defensive because I'm not a Campbell believer. So go right ahead, Tripp.
I think that Campbell's earned the dot, and it surprises me. I mean, he got signed in June for $2 million. I mean, you don't usually expect the guy running the defense to get signed in June for $2 million, but he seems to have earned it. I think Smith comes in there as the second guy. He's a run stuffer. He needs to come off and dime, and so I think that Campbell's safe, and I think that Barnes is dead.
Well, swinging over to Dallas with Jalen Smith, now a Packer. Micah Parsons is playing the edge. Are we comfortable starting LVE and Keanu Neal this weekend? Tripp.
I think that Parsons is back to playing the middle linebacker again. I think that he'll flash down to the edge some to get some snaps down there, but Chauncey Golston looked okay, and the Dorrance Armstrong's coming back this week. Randy Gregory is off the COVID list where he was a couple of weeks ago. So I think that the rotation, they still missing Tank Lawrence, but I think they got enough guys there at DN to rotate through that they'll be okay there, and I think that Parsons will flash down to show them some different looks. But I think that this is why they cut Smith, is because they felt like he was expendable. Too many guys in the rotation. So I think it's LVE is the second guy, and then Neal continues to play a similar role that he had before, where he's a kind of a linebacker coverage guy / slot, where he's getting maybe 3/4 of the snaps. And so I think Van Der Esch has proven that he's a pretty good player. I'm kind of surprised that he was his role was as small as it was earlier, to be honest with you. I always thought that maybe just the challenge was health, but he stayed healthy through 4 games with relatively lesser role, but I would look towards Parsons, and I would not count on either Neal or Van Der Esch to play a full-time role, and I would not be starting them if I could avoid it, if I could help it.
You're breaking my heart, Tripp. You're breaking my heart.
It was exactly my same call Tuesday, if you caught the show, Tripp, that I think Parsons ends up right back in the middle. They got Armstrong coming off and everything you said. I'm not playing any of them this weekend. Maybe Parsons. It just depends on the size of the league. But, this weekend, until we see something work out, folks, we got to see some consistency out of whoever it is, wherever they're going to be. We thought we had Micah at the beginning of the year. Wham, he went to the line as a pass rusher. They had something in mind when they had to let Smith go, because the deadline's still a way off, right? So I'm pretty sure. So I like that, Tripp.
Now, a little piece of injury news. Carlton Davis has gone on the IR with a quad injury. Pierre Desir is slated to replace Davis, according to NBC Sports Edge. Tripp, focusing on Tampa's corners, are we starting Desir, or are we looking at Sherman as the only startable corner in Tampa?
Man, playing Miami with Jacoby Brissett out there, I mean, the pass offense has been sad with him out there. I wouldn't be eager to start anybody. I get that Sherman had like 7 or 8 tackles last week, and we talked about whether or not he'd be startable. And to New England's credit, they went right after him, which is interesting and not really surprising when you think about it. The guy that signs up and shows up 3 days later, he's in Jersey, and like, well, yeah, let's see if he knows the defense. So that makes sense after the fact. But no, I wouldn't be eager to start any Bucs corners against Miami. I mean, yes, you might get a pick out of it, but to tackle volume, I'd be concerned about.
Well, Gary, staying in Tampa, looking at JPP, if he misses a 3rd straight week, could my guy Joe Tryon earn another start in IDP leagues?
When you first brought him up a couple of weeks ago when JPP was questionable, I was like, no, there's no way. And I don't think he did real well that first contest, but it might have been the MSR too. But since then, he definitely has shown that he can get the job done. So I was just looking it up here to see what his MSR was. I'm never going to be able to spell that name. So
it's Tryon. It's pretty simple.
Yeah, scrap
I'll sort my team real quick here because there ain't no way I'm going to be able to do that. I'm pretty sure, 99% sure, that they had a positive MSR this week. So I am going to go, and I'm right here, one more little page, and I'll be able to see it. Almost. I'm working on my phone, folks, and this is scary.
2 thumbs up for Tryon.
Yeah.
All right.
Yes, I would start him this weekend.
What about you, Tripp?
In deeper leagues. Don't expect him to replace JPP. Guy's doing really well. I think they have somebody they found for the future for when JPP is in his 30s. So they actually, contract-wise and stuff, I don't know where he sits, but it looks like they've got a viable guy for the future.
Tripp, you on board with Tryon?
Yeah, man, especially if JPP sits. I mean, I think he's a good start. Of course, depending on your league. If you're looking for sacks, if you're looking for an edge, I like him a lot this week. I think he's a pretty solid start. So, yeah, I'm on board.
All right. Well, speaking of injuries, you both told me to bail on Kenneth Murray. You were right. However, it was because of an injury, and we don't take injury victory laps here. But Drew Tranquil seems to be the heir apparent. Tripp, is this correct?
It looks like it, man. It looks like Kazir White was playing in the same role he was before, at least similar, and Tranquil is just next man up behind him. And he's a guy that I know Gary likes too, and he's a guy that I thought looked pretty functional in his career. And so he comes in here this week. He's got a pretty nice matchup here with Cleveland. It's just going to run the ball a lot, and it's been productive opponent for inside linebackers all season. So, man, that's the way to go. All of a sudden, anybody who got him off the waiver wire, who stashed him as an advance stash, is sitting pretty with a pretty good starter, I would say, especially this week. I don't know if he'll be a 100% player, but I like him to play enough snaps to be useful against the Browns.
Now, a question from Reddit from Shabzilla. 16-team Dynasty League. They can only roster 5 linebackers. They have Cunningham coming off of IR, so they have to cut somebody. They have Cunningham, Eric Kendricks, Eric Wilson, Tay Crowder, Drew Tranquil, and Derek Barnes. I'm leaning Tay Crowder, but that's because I like rookies and dynasty stashes. Where are you going, Gary?
Yeah, Barnes, Cunningham, Crowder. Who else?
Kendricks, Wilson, and Tranquil.
Which Wilson?
Eric.
I like Barnes too. I'd cut bait on Wilson. If it was me, I'd cut bait on Wilson. I don't think he's as good as last I had read about a couple weeks ago. He was not actually doing as well on the field as they wanted him to. So he actually took a snap count hit week before last. And then this week, I think it went back up. And he had production, but sometimes you get picked on. I think I'd go Wilson. I think that if that's the case, there's probably some equivalent IDP meat on the waiver wire probably to go get. So, yeah, Wilson would be gone.
Tripp, you on board?
Well, the first guy to get rid of in my mind is Barnes. He's playing half the snaps, and he's out there rotating with Jalen Reese-May, but I think he's an easy cut. The second guy is a little tougher, I think. I don't mind Wilson. He's I agree with Gary, generally speaking, on all those points. But I guess the guy I'd be a little more worried about is Tay Crowder. He's a risk reward guy in that sense. But it's pretty difficult.
He's not a big dude. He's kind of, I want to say, right. Hate to call a guy fragile in the NFL, but he's just not a really big stature and physical physique, put it that way.
Right.
So
very good. So we are leaning Derek Barnes and then Tay Crowder. Correct?
Eric Wilson.
You're on Eric Wilson. All right. Well, you have three options, Shabzilla.
Maybe we'll agree on the comment on the thing. I don't know.
Well, you know what? We actually have a comment from Manish up on our stream. Thoughts on Ashton Davis? I did not know the Jets released Jared Wilson today.
Poor Jared Wilson.
Yeah.
He might stick there for a moment in Jacksonville. At least he's a rotational guy. And yeah.
That's a hard fall to be a starter in year or 2 years.
He was a starter last year. Yeah. Not a bad team, obviously, but I didn't think he was so bad that they wouldn't bring him back. But then again, they had a new regime and things happen. But makes it tough to stick. Ashton Davis, I think, actually fits in pretty nicely with Marcus May out. I think May is still out this week. So Ashton Davis could step right in the start and be productive, quite honestly. I wouldn't count on that, but it's possible. So who's the free safety there? Forget.
They've got Colbert. They had Wilson. Yeah. They got Colbert and they got Mays. So.
Yeah, I would expect May and Davis to start once they both are healthy and ready to go. So I think in that situation, Davis is still the deep guy. So in that situation, I'm not eager to have him for IDP, but if you're in a super deep league like we just heard, where you're rostering all those 8-9 linebackers, then maybe Davis is useful there.
All right, well, let's head north. To the home of the Red Wings and the winless Lions. Romeo Okwara is out, and Trey Flowers has been limited after missing the past 2 weeks. Charles Harris is playing 90% of the snaps. Austin Bryant played 74% last week. Are either worth starting?
I'm starting Charles. I believe it or not, I think the guy has actually found his little niche there. He's actually maybe I like the MSR this week. I've actually got him in a couple of my lineups already.
You on board with that, Tripp?
For this week, folks.
I saw something curious on the Bird app the other day. Is that Charles Harris, who was a first-round pick of the Dolphins several years ago now, has more sacks on the season than any Dolphin. That's a curious little stat. But I get that all the numbers and the logic all adds up for Harris being a reasonable start this week. But I just don't think he's good. I just can't do it.
That's a shocker, right? How many? We talked about this a little bit on Tuesday. how many retread veterans or veterans that maybe haven't even been producing over the last few years of their career, but have been in the opportunity to do so, like Julian Thompson, the safety, strong safety for Kansas City? No, for Arizona. He's actually producing. You got Diggs producing after having a flat year last year in Seattle. He was. You've got numerous players like that, and Charles is just a poster child of when you're a first-round draft pick, been to multiple teams, been nothing but a depth player, and then all of a sudden stand him up as an outside linebacker and tell him to get after the football makes a difference, I guess. I have no idea what's happening, but I'm riding that hot hand. But it's in a deep, deep format. So,
all right. Well, with Poyer out for the Bills, Jaquan Johnson stepped up and played every snap in week 4, posting 3 tackles, an interception, and a pass defense. Is he starter material if Poyer is still out, Tripp?
I don't hate it. I mean, deep league second guy, I could see that. If Poyer's still out, the Chiefs haven't been giving up a ton of points to the safety position this year, but you got to like the role, right? I mean, you got the Hyde sitting back and is traditionally the deeper player, and so yeah, there's an opportunity there. But I would look for that would be kind of a streaming type of a solution if I had injuries in such a position. It's not a guy I'd seek out.
All right. Gary, going up to Boston, Kyle Van Noy is out-snapping Matt Judon, but Judon has outproduced Van Noy in both of the last 2 weeks. Is he a safe start going forward?
Judon or Van Noy? Van Noy, no.
Judon.
Oh, yeah. It's another one of those situations. It's kind of like riding a hot hand. We've got veterans that aren't producing with the ceilings that they've been known to have, and we've got some that are really struggling. We got some doing good. Thank goodness some of them have pulled back. But, I mean, if I was looking, especially for an edge rush position, for if he was DL eligible off the edge, I'd definitely start him. If I'm looking at him as a general linebacker play, man, that's tough. I mean, he has been getting it done, and I do believe he's got a nice MSR this week or matchup strength. If I was in a league where I was really desperate and needed a full linebacker, I think he can be a solid linebacker two guy. I just have a hard time doing that with outside linebackers and those kinds of schemes. And a Patriot scheme, you might as well just call it junk because they just run whatever the hell they want to whenever they walk out there at any given time. So, but either way, Judon is a good play, I believe, going forward. But I would rather use him as an edge or DL if I'm going to start him. Linebacker, I'm still really iffy about that one.
Tripp?
Yeah, he's a little light as a linebacker, but if you got an LB3 spot open or near the end of the position, he's a guy that I drafted just all over the place. More best ball, or if he's an edge, I'll admit. But I like him. I think he's a good player. He certainly looks the part in New England, and so he had a 7 tackle game last week, but that was easily his season high. So. Not an ideal start, but boy, he has sacks in 3 of his 4 games. And, I think there's something to be said sometimes, depending on your settings, to go ahead and get a guy you think has a good chance for a sack as opposed to just a ho-hum LB3 like Dre Greenlaw or somebody like that, right? And so in that sense, I kind of like him. And so I think he has a matchup, which is attractive this week playing Houston. That Davis Mills guy, I mean, he can't hold the football. He can't move the team down the field. He's probably just a sitting duck back there for some sacks. So I think that Judon is pretty attractive.
So, and this is really, not to interrupt you there, JJ, but this is him talking. The first thing I should have asked was, what's the scoring format? I mean, if we're in a balanced or a tackle heavy, that's where I'm leaving. Tackle heavy, I don't think that I would definitely chase him. And if it was a sack heavy league, yeah, sure. Why wouldn't you? Because he's apparently getting to the quarterback. But that's a tough topic that it's hard to, when we're talking like this, I think, or we're answering questions, sometimes you got to ask those hard questions, and to figure it out, to really narrow it in for people. But hey, if you was one ahead of me, if you went and you stacked your teams with Judon, whether it was a high draft pick or not, it probably wasn't. Yeah, I don't own him anywhere, and he's not on any waiver wires in these deep formats that I'm in.
All right.
Now, we talked about Davis Mills, but on the other side, Mac Jones is starting. Is there anyone on the anemic Texans D that we should be starting this week, Tripp?
Find it on my list here. Yeah, I think that Justin Reed has been a pretty attractive player for Houston so far. One thing that'd be interesting to see if Houston can keep it close. I'd feel better about all their defenders if I thought they could keep the game close. But I do think that Reed's pretty attractive as a safety there. He's made some plays, and I think he's a good player. And the Patriots are not throwing the ball to boundary all that much. They're using Hunter Henry and Jacoby Myers to throw the ball over the middle, and so that's a good situation. And then Reed will have to step up and play some of the box too if the Patriots are milking the clock. So that's where I'd look if I was looking for Texas defender this week. And that's not to say I wouldn't start Kirksey and Cunningham if they're healthy. I think that they're pretty much set it and forget it starts at this point in the season.
All right, so Washington is facing off against the Saints, but instead of worrying about slants, I have questions about the curl. Yeah. On 79% of the football team's defensive snaps, Cameron Curl, Bobby McCain, and Landon Collins are out there. Now, I'm no mathematician, but that's 3 safeties. Should I feel comfortable, Gary, in starting all 3 safeties?
No, I wouldn't. Something's hairy going on there for some reason, because you went to those weeks where Curl only had so many snaps, and then why they're playing Bobby McCain over him, I have no real idea. This is just for some direction that deep in the field. But Landon Collins is the only one that I'm going to trust this week, at least. If I'm going to play, I think he's just a solid play. So I'm just saying, out of these 3, he's still the only one that I have any inkling to trust at this moment.
So, Tripp, was that just an anomaly 1 week where they just went with the 3 safety look?
Well, I think it's a combination of things. First of all, John Bostic got hurt. And the second thing was Benjamin St. Juste, the third cornerback, was out too. And so they had some snaps to cover. And I was going back and forth a little bit with John Macri of PFF about what the purpose or what the cause of that was, and whether it was St. Juste or whether or not it was Bostic getting hurt. I think it's pretty hard to tell. Now, in this case coming up here where they got the Saints, and the Saints have a conservative offense. They're running the ball a lot, trying to possess the football, keeping the snap count down. I don't think that any Washington football team safety is a particularly strong start this week just because of that. Now, Collins would be the best bet of the 3 because he was full-time last week, and he does have the box chops. And
all of a sudden, he's decided to produce something. God, I was getting so worried about him.
Yeah, and then they got a comment right there, Jamin Davis. Yeah, I think that Jamin Davis is the guy. And I think in a week like this where you're playing a conservative offense where you need linebackers out there, I think that Davis gets his chance. I think that Davis is exactly the kind of guy they need to try to run with Kamara in the pass game. So I think Davis, I think he could be trial by fire this week. And I think that's probably a decent start. I got him in a couple of spots, and I think I'm going to try to get him in there.
Is there anybody else at the linebacker position, Gary, who you think might be able to step in for Bostic, or is it clearly Jamin Davis?
Is Thomas Davis still on that roster?
No.
Okay. Yeah. No, not really. And I bet they're hoping Holcomb's. He was questionable last time I looked, but I would imagine they're hoping that he's going to play. I find it interesting. They're playing Atlanta.
Saints.
I was curious if Chase Young's ever going to get his first sack of the year.
This is it, man. Put it in the bank.
If it's not this week, if I remember right, filling out my start sit charts, if it's not this week, it's time to panic, folks. He has to get one, and MSR is there for that, the matchup.
All right, well, let's take a look across the pond. I'm excited to fire up all of the Jets pass rushers for the matchup against Matt Ryan and the Falcons. But then I realized that 6 of the 8 sacks Atlanta has allowed have come from the interior defensive linemen. So who should I be starting in this game, Tripp?
For the Jets, it's big old Quincy Williams, man. He's going to eat this time. He had a bit of a slow start, but had a couple sacks last week. He ought to have a couple more this week. The only thing that gets me is his snap counts are too low, at least in my opinion, for the quality of player he is. But man, this is the time. Atlanta doesn't know what to do with the offensive guard position. He's going to eat.
Well, you don't want the Jets to slip up and leave them in there and win.
That's a good point. What do we
bad,
Careful, Gary. I'll take this right to a dirty O-pod.
The guy that's next to him, too, I'm not going to pronounce his name, starts with an F. Foley
Falakazi.
Yeah, he might actually be a little bit of a sleeper in some deep format, folks. Deep formats. But it is surprising that Atlanta last year was like giving the points away off the edge. And now this year they are not. Now it's all in the interior. So I'm not exactly sure what changed on that offensive line. But, yeah, it's all coming on that interior.
Well, not sure if you saw it. I'm a little bit happy because I really liked, A, the Jets won last week, and B, their pass rush looked good. JFM actually just signed a 4-year extension with the Jets tonight.
Who did play last week?
Tennessee.
Well, that's because Tennessee gifts like so much.
Listen, don't rain on my parade, Gary.
I'm sorry, I'm not trying to.
Stop. I'll get a spray bottle and just spray it.
I'm just going to let you guys know that Tennessee is top 10 across the offensive line. They've got one of the. So, yes, I'm glad that they feasted. And I love that. What's his Franklin, maybe?
Yeah, Jonathan Franklin.
I like him coming. Yeah, I like him coming up a lot too. But
yeah, Bryce Huff looked good. That entire line looked good.
I forgot you guys won.
It felt good. Week. Felt good a little bit.
Sorry for assuming,
Gary. You and I are going to have a talk after this. All right.
I'll look this for the Jets.
Now, Tripp, with the game being in London, is that considered a good start for IDP?
Well, it's interesting because the London stat crew, now granted they haven't played in London since 2019. The pandemic canceled the 2020 games, but the games that have been played in London by the stat crews, and they're playing at Tottenham Hotspur Stadium this week, and that stat crew just doesn't give out assists, almost never, which is weird. But I don't know if they're not being trained up or if they just have their own opinions, but and so that it kind of shaves some of the upside off those tackle guys. I mean, there was a game a couple weeks ago where Anthony Harris had 6 solos and 8 assists. Well, that's a whole lot better in the stat column than just say 8 solos. And so I'm going to have to fade to the extent I can all of the tacklers, which is all the safeties and all the inside linebackers on these teams, which could hurt because there's 4 startable inside linebackers most weeks on these teams. But if I'm in a conundrum, if I'm in a tie-breaking situation, then I've got to fade that because that's a real significant impact. I mean, there are some stadiums where you got like close to half your tackles that are handed out are assists, and this stadium doesn't give out any. Or the game I looked at was a 24-21 game against the Raiders and the Bears from Tottenham a couple of years ago, and the Bears got 0 assists, and the Raiders got 2. Like, what are we doing?
Wow,
yeah,
that's insane.
If you're going there, that whole Europe thing, it's like a Thursday night game. I hate having IDPs or even offensive players unless they're like complete studs playing on Thursdays. But those are if I'm going to play, which I'm not sitting Mosley, I'm not sitting Oakland, and I'm not sitting Deion Jones. But that's just thinking on the fact of they're going to get that 8 tackle, and probably no assist. I think they're still going to be solid enough. I think there's enough margin there that I'll still slide them into my lineups. But I get what you're saying. It'd be different if they was counting those assists as more tackles, solos. That would be different, but that's apparently not the case. I see what you're saying there.
Well, speaking of Thursday night IDP games, Right now, the Seahawks are up 7-3 with 10 seconds left. Carlos Dunlap has finally showed up with 3 total tackles. That's a big week for Carlos this year.
Wow.
Jordan Brooks has 5. Bobby Wagner 3. On the other side, we have Sebastian Joseph Day with 5 tackles. Aaron Donald has 3 and a tackle for a loss. Nothing too interesting going on yet over there. All right, gentlemen, I am not sure if Zach Wilson has Corey Davis on his fantasy team or if it's just a budding bromance, but he is consistently peppering him with targets. Is this an opportunity to start Atlanta's corners, Trips?
I kind of like it. That's that Corey Davis is the big body on the outside, and Wilson's looking for him, and Wilson is not shy to push the ball down the field. Probably a little, too daring. Yeah. We'll see. We'll see how it evolves. But Terrell is a guy that was top 15 or so as a cornerback last year. Is out there a lot of snaps. Is out gets a lot of opportunities. A bigger guy gets his hands on the ball a little bit for pass defense. So yeah, I that's a guy that I would be looking to if I'm streaming cornerbacks to go ahead and get in my lineup.
All right. Well, I was hoping to see a rebound for Greg Rousseau against the Texans last week, but we have watched his snap share go from 73% to 56 to 38. Is it time just to bench him? Is it over for him, Gary?
Well, yeah, I mean, you certainly can't trust him until that gets back up there. He has to get a nice chunk of the SCR or snap counts. He needs to get plenty of snaps to even have that opportunity, because you can't feel all warm and fuzzy with a guy that's only out there on limited basis, because he'll completely depend on a splash play like a sack that comes with tackle for loss or something along that line, and that's the only way you can get ahead. Why they can't quit Jerry Hughes and Mario Anderson, I have no clue. They should have quit Jerry about 4 years ago, and I don't know what they were thinking about bringing Addison in. And he wasn't recently playing a lot of snaps either. He has kind of a small average, at least maybe I'm thinking about last year. I hardly even look at him when I do my start sit charts, because it doesn't matter what the MSR is, which is the matchup strength. 9 times out of 10, they can't match it. They can't match it, but I can put that same team against another, say against your Jets, and Franklin would come out with 3 sacks. You know what I mean? Can't do that with Jerry and Addison. It's just I don't know what. I guess they don't believe in pass rush.
Well, Addison's been hovering right around 50% of the snaps. He dropped a little bit last week, but Carlos Basham Jr. jumped up up to 49% last week. Tripp, is this a sign that they're going with the other rookie instead of Rousseau?
No, Basham has been a healthy scratch a couple of times, I think. I wouldn't worry about Rousseau. I think he's looked pretty effective. I mean, long term, that is. This week, you can't put him out there this week against the Chiefs and Mahomes. Their line has held up okay. You just got to give Rousseau some time. You got to see how it shakes out. I mean, it may be that he's made mistakes that don't show up in the box score and that he's lost some time. He's a young guy. I mean, and the Bills have been doing this big rotation for a lot of years now. They've been getting a lot of these D linemen that all look the same. They're all 6'4", 265, and they rotate them through. It's like it's just interchangeable parts for them. And I think eventually a guy like Rousseau. I mean, I wasn't a huge fan of Rousseau coming out, but he could. He's looked pretty good so far. He could be the guy that emerges. And I think sometimes these rotations are just the reason they rotate is because they don't have a guy that stands out. Once a guy stands out, he plays 85% of the snaps on the edge, and that's where it goes. And I think Rousseau might eventually get there, but if you're holding him in a redraft league, you got to hope you got space for him. And if you do, he's a guy just like a rookie running back like Javonte Williams that could emerge in the second half of the year, but you're not looking for him now.
Well, Gary, Willie Gay has been designated for return by the Chiefs and may be back on the roster by next week. Should we consider scooping him up if he's available?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I can think of a few others that I would rather have instead, just getting ready to come off the IR, like Jared Davis or something. But sure, yeah. I mean, Willie Gay is probably just as good as any of them in the long run, but not for me. No. because Kansas City just, I mean, I don't know, all of a sudden Hitchens is getting a lot of snaps, and they changed that whole situation where everybody got a piece of the pie during the games. But with Willie Gay being back in, I'm probably picking somebody else because I'm afraid of these rotations that Reed likes to have. You're going to have Bolton still there. You're going to have Hitchens still there. I'd like to think Willie Gay would walk in and just take over. But I'm one of those ones that you've got to prove it to me. I've got to see it before I go buying it after the history that the Chiefs have with their linebackers.
What about you, Tripp?
I'd buy it and hold my breath. They talked about Gay being a full-time guy this summer. There's so many guys that aren't full-time that are producing right now at the linebacker position, the Eagles guys being good examples. I would take a chance and see what came of it, to be honest with you. But I hear your concern. I mean, what is to say that the Chiefs put a guy out there 100% of the snaps? I mean, it's been years since they did. I don't think Spagnuolo's ever done it as a defensive coordinator in Kansas City. So it's certainly a concern. But he seems to be the guy that has the upside that to do it. So it's interesting to me.
Well, sticking with the Chiefs, I have a little budding man crush on L'Jarius Sneed, and not because he has a name that sounds like a Charles Dickens villain. You twirl his mustache. I love that name. But the man has played over 95% of the snaps every week and has been producing. Tripp, can I comfortably start him in 2 to 3 DB leagues?
I like him as a third DB. I think this is the kind of guy you look for. I think he's one of the best cornerbacks in terms of fantasy you can find. He plays a lot of snaps in the slot. He gets to blitz from there occasionally. I got a sack last week. He's going to see a little bit of Stephon Diggs this week, so that's pretty attractive. The Bills have been throwing the ball all over the yard this year and last. Low run percentage snaps. And so I like him. I think he's the way to go. I think you absolutely start him over boring safeties that are stuck in two deep systems. So, yeah, I think he's pretty interesting.
Getting defensive. They're not boring safeties. Other than that.
Oh, what are they? What are they, Gary, if they're not boring
consistent.
safeties? Oh, consistent. Consistently boring?
Well, all right. I'm just not a cornerback guy. I've been streaming cornerbacks all year in the IDP incentive. I didn't draft any in our draft this year. When we had our draft, it's a keeper league now, and I've been plucking them up off of the waiver wire. And these are deep formats. It's actually a 16-team league, 30 bench or 30 roster, and I've just been plucking. I had Marco Wilson for the last 2 weeks because his MSR was correct. I had Campbell of the Jaguars. I'm sitting on him now. Some reason Mike Hughes was on the waiver wire, so I snagged him up, and I think I got him with Campbell this week. And so far, I think that out of streaming 2 a week and switching up here and there, I think I've only had one fail. Cornerbacks are streamable positions for me. I just prefer when it's a DB situation. At least in the past, safeties to me were a nice, soft floor, high ceiling, easy, consistent, not take a zero. That's my main concern when it comes to cornerbacks is not taking a zero. I understand there's a bunch of them out there, Tripp, and there seems to be even more this year than since I'm actually paying attention to corners and trying to catch up on what this whole corner deal is, because I realize too that that's the reason that balanced IDP and all this other, I'm not even going to say the name, all these other types of scoring systems really have kicked in for the last couple of years. Everybody sit there and go, oh, the poor cornerback over there, he's not getting no love in scoring on this because he can't get any tackles or unless he really sucks, Yeah, whatever. But I'm trying to catch up. I'm trying to get like Tripp and just believe, but I'm not there yet.
Well, Gary, if I can educate you a little bit, what you want to look for is you want to take the corners who are closest to the ball.
Yeah.
That's why you look for somebody like L'Jarius Sneed, because he plays in the slot and he rushes. Right, Tripp?
That's right. Let me ask you
I can be taught. I can be taught.
What would you start? Jaquan Johnson, Micah Hyde or L'Jarius Sneed this week? If you had a DB spot, you need a guy.
Jaquan Johnson, Micah Hyde, or L'Jarius Sneed.
Yeah.
Twirl the mustache. L'Jarius Sneed is going in for me.
That's me too. Me too. I mean, the Chiefs, everybody that's played the Chiefs have been sitting back and too high. And that I think the Bills will do the same thing. Even though they're typically a one high team, I think they'll show more too high. And I wouldn't rely on either Johnson or if it was Poyer, you got to start Poyer. But if Poyer's out and you're looking at those two guys, it's like you got to go Sneed, in my opinion.
And I was shocked that Micah Hyde lost some snaps last week.
Did he?
He lost some snaps. So
I think that's because it was a blowout and they just got guys in there.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Who's Kansas City playing?
They're playing Buffalo this week.
It's a nice little matchup. That should be a fun game. What? He's looking at the MSR. Is that what it's called?
Well,
isn't that the thing you have at the card?
I almost got a nosebleed from looking at that. So that should be one hell of a contest. Who is it the Buffalo plays?
Kansas City.
They play each other. Duh. Shit.
Generally, that helps.
Right.
Although that's a great, interesting idea if you throw in a third team.
Yeah, wouldn't that be fun?
Yeah, I would have been like
swapping around. I like it.
Yeah, in this situation, I already had him as a sit. So give me Sneed.
Awesome. We're all on the same page.
Twirl the mustache. Let's go. Ebenezer Scrooge, baby. All right. The Ravens are playing the 1-3 Colts and the double sprained ankled Carson Wentz. Should we expect a feeding frenzy Tripp?
I think we might should. It's hard to. It's a little bit like the Bills and who the heck is going to be rushing the passer. But man, you want some upside. I mean, it's pretty attractive to chase these guys. Last week the guy was Tyus Bowser who got his first 2 sacks of the year. So it's hard to figure out who it's going to be. But man, it's worth a go because the Colts have been giving up sacks. Their line does not look the same. They got guys hurt. It's just. And there's nobody to stretch the field. And so it's almost like Carson Wentz is in the same spot he was last year where he has no line and nobody to throw the ball to anymore. And so and the Ravens are just going to eat his lunch if they can't stretch the defense.
So Gary, if I had to pick one edge to start in Baltimore, who do you feel the strongest about?
I'd have to go with the rookie. I'm going to pronounce his name incorrectly.
F.A. Obata?
Yeah, but
I'll help you out on that one, buddy.
If I'm going there, that's who. It's hard to trust. They rush so many guys at one time. They rush so much, So, I mean, you would think that would be to any of their advantages. But when you've got 5 guys rushing, only one of you can get to the quarterback first. So, but if I was going to do it, it'd be the rookie.
Well, keep in mind, they're not playing in London, so there can be split sacks.
Yep. No.
I wanted to follow up on something you said later, Gary. With Jared Davis possibly coming off the IR in the next few weeks, do you see him completely replacing Quincy Williams, or do you think Quincy Williams has done enough?
No. Quincy Williams is not the player that Jared Davis was, that they was wanting to begin with. They've got, don't quote me because I've only seen a little bit of the games, but from what I've seen, they've got Mosley playing out of position. He should be playing what Quincy's playing, and Jared Davis should be playing what Mosley's playing, if I'm correct. If I'm not correct, it still doesn't really matter because you're talking, I'm glad Quincy is doing well for himself, but he's not going to keep Jared Davis off the field.
Now, he's been playing the run game pretty well. Outside of that, when he falls back in coverage, you're just hoping it doesn't go. Is there any long-term plan, do you think, for Quincy Wilson there, Tripp?
No, I don't think so. They picked him up just a couple of weeks ago, right? I mean, was it August they signed him? And it was just because they had Blake Cashman, who I think they just finally had to throw the towel in on. And then they had 5th and 6th round rookies that they were trying to convert from safety to play linebacker in the NFL. I was like, had to get somebody that had some experience, and so they rolled out Delshon Phillips, who I had never heard of once, and he got tackles and
ever.
Yeah. And so Quincy Williams, they got him. So yeah, he's just a warm body filling that spot. I agree with Gary. I don't really know why the Jets think Jared Davis is so good, but they seem to really like him. And like Gary said, they got Mosley playing that spot now until Davis comes back. So I think they move Mosley over to Williams' spot and then put Davis in that spot wearing a dot. And yeah, he should be useful IDP the rest of the season if he stays healthy.
That's a big, big if. Well, it is time for final thoughts. You can find Tripp at Dynasty Tripp on Twitter, and his work is at dynastyfootballfactory.com. Tripp, any thoughts?
Man, that's Sebastian Dose of Day. I got to dig into that, figure out how the heck that guy's getting so many tackles, man. I feel bad that I haven't had him in any of the waiver wire articles to date. So I'm glad I started him in one spot where I really needed help at DT.
I like anybody with a great name or a hyphenated name.
There you go.
Those are my two rules of IDP or fantasy football in general. Finally, the OG of IDP can be found at the IDP Tipster on Twitter, and subscribe to Gridiron Ratings for all of his IDP analysis. Gary, any final thoughts?
Yeah. Get ready to be real flexible this year, folks. Be ready to be flexible, because I got a feeling what we've seen for the last 4 weeks, 5 weeks, or whatever is going to continue this new season, 17 weeks, all of the stuff that we've been talking about. I think that you better learn to work the waiver wire pretty good this year.
Absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm at JJ Wenner on Twitter. Thank you to Tripp and Gary, as always, for joining me tonight. Thank you to everybody who tuned in and submitted questions to us. Make sure you tune in to our Tuesday edition, hosted by Craig Reith and the crew. And don't forget to subscribe to Gridiron Ratings for a chance to win the Gridiron Ratings Playbook. Good night, everyone.